So how can organizations meet this challenge? Well, first of all, they have to be able to identify their risks, and then they have to meet all of these internal and external compliance requirements. Then they have to be able to update these on a regular basis as requirements resolved and have a systematic way of doing so. And then when they're faced with internal and external audits, they have to be able to prove compliant. And this can often prove difficult because if you are compliant, but you have no ability to prove it, then your non-compliance can be perceived and the penalties can oftentimes be the same. So we're going to talk about the art of the possible. What do we mean by that? Well, the best case scenario, and that is taking your organization from, okay, we've defined our risks and we defined our controls, to being able to prove that your risks and our risks and controls are effective. And so we want to be able to be resilient. We want to be able to be prepared. We want all of this to be effortless and we want it to be collaborative. So there's four pillars here that we feel are important when discussing the art of the possible or the best case scenario. And the first is perfect harmony. We want uh, perfect harmony and collaboration between the three lines of defense, which are your business units, the risk and control teams, and internal audit. And we'll get into this more in detail in a moment. We want real ownership. And this ownership starts at the business level because they are the ones that are ultimately having to actually run the operations that take risk and compliance into account. We want easy proof. We want to be able to easily prove that we're compliant. We want that to be fast. We want that to be easy. We want it to be accurate. We want it also to be able to automate manual parts of this process. And then we also want resilient operations. We want to be able to respond quickly and efficiently to changes in the operational landscape, to changes in the risk landscape, so that we are always compliant, regardless of how fast changes occur. So when discussing perfect harmony, we talked about the three lines of defense. Now, the three lines of defense, we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail in terms of the technology that is existing to help these three lines of defense manage risk and compliance. But an organization with an effective risk management program has these three lines of defense. The first line being the business unit. They're the ones that are actually carrying out processes. They're the ones carrying out the policies and the procedures that have been defined. Now, even if they're defined very well by the second line of defense, which is the risk and compliance teams, if the business units are not actually operating their businesses in accordance with these policies and procedures, well, then you might as well not have an effective strategy. So business units are that first line. They're the ones that have to actually implement all of these things. That second line of defense are your risk and compliance teams. They're the ones that create the policies and procedures so that they can translate laws and regulations into meaningful actions that need to be taken by the frontline business units. And then the third line of defense is the third line against not only compliance, but against external audits as well. They ensure that the organization is operating in compliance with these laws and regulations. And they're kind of a final check before things go wrong and before you have to face an external audit. So effective risk management comes down to communication between these three lines of defense. And for that, you need to be able to define clear roles and responsibilities. You need to define accountability. And again, there needs to be a seamless mechanism for all of these lines of defense to be able to communicate